The assassin.
You know I break necks, call me Jack Tate. I have no regrets while your life is fading. I'm a crazy fuck equivalent to Satan. When I'm behind the mic, I feel like the greatest. You know I break necks, call me Jack Tate. I have no regrets while your life is fading. I'm a crazy fuck equivalent to Satan. When I'm behind the mic, I feel like the greatest.
What up, y'all? You're listening to Sports Talk with Tropp, and I'm your host, Katie Tropp. Tampa. He's back, bitches. Tom Brady's coming back. He fucking unretired. Cannot believe this shit. I'm sitting here yesterday, looking through my brackets, getting ready for all my March Madness picks, and then all of a sudden my phone sends me this alert that says Tom Brady has unretired, and I'm like double taking, like, is this real? Is this really real? So then I turn it to NFL Network immediately, and there's the breaking news, and it is really real. Tom Brady has unretired. He's coming back for his 23rd season, and he's going to be playing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm super excited about this because I didn't want to see him go yet. I mean, I've enjoyed watching his career, as I've said before, and I'm happy to have him back. And kind of what I think happened. Obviously, I don't know exactly what happened, but I had a theory that when he originally announced his retirement, it wasn't under his terms. I feel like he maybe told somebody close to him that maybe he was retiring or he was leaning towards retiring, and then whoever that person was told somebody else, and then it just somehow got through the grapevine. And then when you have Adam Schefter and all these well-known sources telling us that he's going to retire, I just feel like he kind of was forced into saying he wanted to retire when he didn't really take the time to think about it. And here we are 6 weeks later, and he has unretired. And he said he's coming back to Tampa. And like I said, I'm excited about it. I just bought a Tom Brady Buccaneers jersey like the week before he retired. I'm like, man, I'm not going to get to wear it as much. Well, now that he's back, I can at least sport that thing a few times a year now. But hey, I'm happy to see him back. I'm sure the league, some people in the league are not happy to see him back. I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers is probably like, motherfucker, this dude stole my thunder. I thought I got rid of Russell Wilson in the NFC, and I thought it was going to be an easy road, and it's nope. You got Tom Brady coming back in the NFC, and that's such a good thing for the NFC, because once Russell Wilson was traded out of the NFC to the Broncos, that made the NFC not as competitive. And so bringing Brady back actually makes things a lot more interesting out in the NFC. And now more NFL news. The Cowboys did what I didn't want them to do. They traded Amari Cooper to the Browns. I was not happy with this. It's not a make or break move, I don't believe. It's just I'm a fan of Amari Cooper. I think he's a great route runner. I think he's done nothing but produce and be a great player for the Cowboys, but you know, sometimes just contracts don't work out that way, and the Cowboys were dead set on unloading his contract for whatever reason, and so they wound up trading him to the Browns. I don't see how that makes the offense any better, but you know, like I said, I don't think it really breaks them either, because they also did something else as well. I mean, first of all, we have CeeDee Lamb, and he's only got better since every year that he's been in the league. So there's nothing bad to say about him. He's obviously a good number one. But the other move they made this week was they re-signed Michael Gallup to a $60 million 5-year deal. And I like that move as well. I didn't want to see Michael Gallup go, but if you're making me choose between the two of them, Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, I would go Cooper a million times over, but that's not the way they saw it. And so we'll see what happens there. At the receiver position, you know, like I've said before in the last few episodes, is that this year is definitely a wide receiver year. So if you're looking to just fill some holes or pick up a few guys at wide receiver, there's actually plenty of options out there, and maybe that's what the Cowboys were looking at. But you know, I liked Amari Cooper. I really appreciate what he did for the Cowboys, and you know, it sucks to see him go. And I wish him the best in Cleveland, unless he's playing against the Cowboys. Cowboys also just today signed DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year extension. That's a move I like because it was also rumored that they might unload him. And they were trying to rework a deal with him, and it wasn't looking good. But then today they just announced that they just re-signed him to an extension, which I really dig. The defense is just getting more and more stacked at this point. And it sounds like we're talking to Bobby Wagner, which I love to hear that news too. So it sounds like we're really trying to stack up on defense this offseason. Then also the Raiders gave Max Crosby a $98 million extension. Definitely well deserved. He's played his heart out since he joined the Raiders, and I don't see why they wouldn't sign him to an extension. Then also Kirk Cousins. He got an extension as well. They added a year with him with the Vikings, and it guarantees him $35 million for next year. And basically, they just made this move to free up some cap space. But really, the only reason why I bring this up is because, Kirk Cousins is a pretty middle-of-the-road quarterback. But I got to say, this dude has made some business moves, and he's made some great deals throughout his entire career. If you don't recall, he was first drafted by the Washington Redskins, and that is what they were called at that point. So I'm not doing this changing their name when they were the Redskins. I get it. Now the Redskins are the Commanders, so that's what I will refer to them as from here on out. But when we're speaking past tense and when they were the Redskins, I'm going to continue to call them the Redskins. They existed. I'm not erasing their existence. So go fuck yourself if you have a problem. But anyways, he was drafted by the Washington Redskins. So he got a pretty good rookie contract, but then he was franchised by the Redskins for 2 years in a row. And basically that guarantees you a huge contract. And I can't recall exactly what the numbers were, but he basically got like $28 million guaranteed each year. And that's big. And then he signed a big deal when he went to Minnesota. And then now he gets this $35 million added on to next year. And then he's still playing for $40 million this year. Basically, his career earnings have added up to $231 million. So shout out to Kirk Cousins for making the most of his NFL career. And that is what you have to do. Even if you are not the best, who gives a fuck what people say? If you are at least good enough to do the job, you can make that money. And Kirk Cousins has made that money for damn sure. And he isn't Patrick Mahomes. He isn't the best quarterback in the league. He isn't Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. Kirk Cousins is getting that kind of money. Kind of reminds me of when Sam Bradford was in the league, because he also is a dude who spent the majority of his career injured, but he got some really major contracts throughout his career, and I can imagine what kind of money Sam Bradford ended up walking away with at the end of his career, and that's kind of what it is with Kirk Cousins as well. I'm like, Jesus. He whoever his agent is or whatever he's done with his contracts, shout out to Kirk Cousins. Dude should be given when he retires. I kind of feel like he should be a dude who you bring into the locker room before the season starts to speak with rookies about how to spend your money or how to make proper deals, because that's for damn sure Kirk Cousins has done that throughout his entire NFL career. A couple other moves that were made this week. Mitchell Trubisky actually just signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers today. I don't think that's like I see it more of as like a in-between bridge quarterback. I don't think he's going to make or break the Steelers. He's not going to elevate them to a whole level, but he's definitely better than what they have on their current roster. He's been to the playoffs. They actually have a lot more weapons in Pittsburgh. And they have great coaching staff as well. So I don't see Mitchell Trubisky turning into this amazing quarterback, but I think he's going to do good enough to actually make the Steelers a decent team. They still have to make some other moves, but I think that's, honestly, what else was out there for the Steelers other than what's going on in the draft, and who knows what they're going to do with the draft. But at this point, they need something, and I think that was a good move to get Mitchell Trubisky, at least at this point. Then also Devin McCourty, the cornerback with the Patriots, throughout his career, he just re-signed a 1-year deal with the Patriots, so he's going to stay with them. And then the big The big guy on the market this year is J.C. Jackson, the cornerback who spent this season with the Patriots. Was one of the league leaders in interceptions this year, by the way. Well, the Chargers just signed him today. The Chargers are stacking up that defense. I really, really like what I'm seeing from the Chargers this offseason. They are absolutely filling in the holes that they needed to fill in because their defense was their weakness for the most part this year. And, they traded for Khalil Mack last week, signed J.C. Jackson this week. This Los Angeles Chargers defense ain't nothing to fuck with is what it's looking like to me. And then last in the NFL news, Davante Adams. He was the Green Bay Packers placed a franchise tag on him last week. And he's saying he's not going to play under this franchise tag. So does that mean we're going to have another drama-fied offseason with the Packers this year? Davante Adams is a little bit different breed than Aaron Rodgers, so I don't really see him, being all out there spouting off on bullshit, but he definitely doesn't want the franchise tag. And, one of the things with the franchise tag is even though a player threatens that, that doesn't mean things aren't being worked out behind the scenes. That's actually kind of the point of the franchise tag, is just so a team can keep a player that they maybe are far apart with on contract talks, and that kind of seems the way it is with Davante Adams, and obviously they want him. And my assumption is that when Aaron Rodgers signed his extension, that Davante was kind of part of the deal. I mean, I don't really see Aaron Rodgers signing a 4-year deal and then being happy with his number one receiver basically in his career going anywhere else. So I kind of see some type of deal getting worked out with them. The Packers also released their linebacker Za'Darius Smith today, and he was a big part of their defense. While he was injured for quite a bit at the end of the season, he was still a force on their defense. So that's just another good solid linebacker out there in free agency for the rest of the league to pick up. All right, now let's move on to basketball in my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings. We got some teams back in their rightful positions. Starting with number 1, I got the Phoenix Suns. They must have heard that I bumped them down last week, and they were like, fuck you, Tropp, we're number 1. And so not only did they have a solid week, but last night they absolutely kicked the fucking shit out of my Lakers. It wasn't even a game. It wasn't even a game from the start. I think it was only a game at tip-off. And then, after that, the Lakers just basically stood around and watched the Suns just drop threes on them all night. The final score was 140-111. So, that's completely unacceptable, especially when it's playoff time is rolling around here. But that bumped the Suns up to number 1. Also, they clinched a playoff spot this week. They're the only team so far to clinch a playoff spot. So they're back on the top spot in my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings. And they're 6-4 in their last 10 games, so they're getting back in order. And while they are still missing Chris Paul, they're starting to gel, and the younger players are doing what they need to do to get by. But, hey, they clinched a playoff spot. That's all they needed to do. Then number 2 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings, Grizzlies back up there. They're 47-22 overall, and they had a really solid week. They won 3 games in a row, and Ja Morant, he just continues to have a great season and make a case for MVP. They're also 6-4 in their last 10 games. Then number 3 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings are the Boston Celtics. They're still playing well. They had like an up and down week where they won a game, lost a game, won a game. And they lost to the Mavericks yesterday, so they actually lost to a good team. But they're 7-3 overall in their last 10 games, 41-28 overall. So they're still doing well, and they're making a great playoff run at this point. Then number 4 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings are the Miami Heat, 45-24, currently still first in the Eastern Conference, 7-3 in their last 10 games. But they also had a week where they won one, lost one, won one, lost one. So their week wasn't as electric as the Suns or the Grizzlies. So that's why those two bumped down. Then at number 5 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. They also kind of had an up and down week. They're 42-26 overall, 7-3 in their last 10 games. But they got smashed by the Golden State Warriors the other night. So they did get a couple good wins, but man, that game against the Warriors, that was something the Warriors needed, by the way, and we'll talk about that more when I get to them. Then number 6 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings are the Philadelphia 76ers, 41-25 overall. 7-3 in their last 10 games. And last week they kind of cooled off from all the the James Harden hype, but I still think they're a great team. A lot of people are now kind of like trashing James Harden, which is just hilarious. So you go from, oh my God, they're the team to beat out East, and then now this week it's James Harden parties too much or some shit like that. It's like, what NBA player doesn't? Hell, what athlete doesn't? What famous person doesn't? Shit. What regular people don't? So that's kind of a stupid thing to say in my opinion, but the 76ers, they did cool off this week. They had a couple off games. They played Orlando, I think it was last night, the night before, and they barely got by them. So they were struggling this week, but they're still number 6. Then number 7 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings, moving back up, Golden State Warriors. 46-22 overall this season. And they finally got on a nice winning streak. They've won 3 straight, and they smashed the Bucks on Saturday night, and led by Klay Thompson, by the way, who had 38 points, finally had like the game everybody's been waiting for. I mean, it's going to take, dude, you expect it to take a while for a guy who suffered the injuries that he suffered the last 2 years to make it back to where he's been. And overall, I'd say his season's been very solid. But on Saturday night against the Bucks, that was classic Klay Thompson and classic Golden State Warriors. And they have had a great week of basketball, so that bumped them back up to number 7 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings. Then number 8 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings are the Dallas Mavericks, 42-26 overall. They had a great week. They've won 2 in a row, 8-2 overall, 8-2 in their last 10 games. And they just beat the Boston Celtics the other night, and so they're beating good teams. And they're just a silent killer, man. I wouldn't be shocked if the Mavericks make some waves come playoff time, just because nobody's really talking about them. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense because you got the Suns, you got the Grizzlies, and you got the Warriors out west. But I mean, I kind of feel like you just got to look out for the Mavericks because they are a damn good team. Then at number 9 on my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings, I have the Chicago Bulls. Overall, they're 41-26, and they've won 2 in a row so far. They had a pretty solid week. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games, but they had a couple good games this week, couple bad games this week. But overall, they're playing pretty well. And they're getting guys back from injury at the perfect time because playoff time is right around the corner here. And then rounding out my Tropp 10 NBA power rankings are the Utah Jazz. Overall record 42-25, 6-4 in their last 10 games. Last week they also kind of had a up and down week, just like the Bulls. So when I was going back and forth between them and the Bulls, I couldn't really. The only thing that made put the Bulls over the Jazz for me was that they've won 2 in a row, where the Jazz have just won 1 in a row. So that's my this week's Tropp 10 NBA power rankings. A couple other notable NBA notes from this week. LeBron had dropped another 50 points, this time on the Wizards. Not a very good team, but at least they got the win, and he just went off. Apparently his mom was in the house, and so if that's what we need to get the Lakers going, maybe we need Mama James in the house because, what happened last night with the Lakers was just such a mess. And even though it was a mess, LeBron actually did end up getting his 10,000th assist last night to Carmelo Anthony, of all people. And he's now the only player to have 30,000 plus points and 10,000 career assists. So another notch in LeBron James' belt in his NBA career. Basically, just like Tom Brady, man, he just keeps going and keeps adding more and more to his resume. It's like, what doesn't this guy have? A good team this year, though. That's not what he has this year. That's for damn sure. The Lakers are awful. And that game last night, it wasn't even a game. They literally put me to sleep because I'm like, I'm not watching this shit. I mean, they couldn't get anything going. And so that's why it's like, even if they make the playoffs, I'm not expecting them to do anything because that was the best team in the league they were playing last night. So what are they going to play like the rest of the playoffs? Then another huge performance was actually Kevin Durant yesterday went off 53 points versus the Knicks in a close back and forth matchup. And man, like KD, I love watching KD. He is just a master on the basketball court, and he just has such a different game than like a LeBron James. You know, LeBron's gonna body you. He's gonna get you in the paint. He can shoot from the three, but KD just has this. I don't know. It's kind of like he's a basketball ballerina where he just moves so swiftly across the court, and he shoots so beautifully. It's just, I love watching KD play. It's just too bad the Nets are pretty awful too. I mean, they do have a much better chance than the Lakers do out west. But I don't know if I believe in the Nets, at least at this point. I mean, like I said, KD, he's a difference maker, and if he stays healthy, that dude's going to get that team some wins in the playoffs. But I don't know how far they're going to go, but I'm not going to count dude out. And then just one last thing I saw this weekend with the NBA. The Celtics retired Kevin Garnett's number 5. Very well deserved. Kevin Garnett, one of the greatest NBA players of all time. I absolutely enjoyed his career 100%. Even though he was a Lakers rival from start to finish, when he was a Timberwolf, when the years they were good, a lot of people don't remember the years they were good. Yeah, Kevin Garnett won MVP. Like, he was an MVP out in Minnesota. And they used to be the team that would always be against the Lakers, and we'd be battling back and forth for who's going to be number 1. So there was a couple seasons where it was like that. And then they start to fall off, and then he gets traded to Boston. And we unfortunately lost a finals to them, and then we beat them in the finals. So, but KG, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, I really enjoyed his game. I really enjoyed the way he played. But one of the crazy things that you actually saw was Ray Allen was there. He was in the building. So it seems like they finally squashed this stupid beef that they had over Ray Allen signing with the Heat. Like, come on, man. Y'all's careers are over at this point, so why are you still holding that kind of shit over somebody? I mean, obviously I don't know all the inner workings of these dudes and what really happens in their lives, but I kind of looked at it like, Ray Allen was a huge piece of that Celtics puzzle, whether you like it or not. I mean, Ray Allen, that talk about another great player, man. That was another dude who I really enjoyed watching play as well. When he was with the Supersonics, when he was with the Celtics, when he was with the Heat, that dude made the big shot every single time. And oh God, so it was cool to see that he was there and that they finally squashed that beef. All right. And now that we've got baseball season, we got some moves going on in baseball now. Like, first of all, teams reported to training. It's just spring training. Giants reported today. Saw pictures of them walking in. Yay! We got us some baseball, y'all, and I'm super fucking excited about it. So what happened this weekend? Clayton Kershaw staying with the Dodgers. Not really surprised by that. His career has been marred by injuries the last couple of seasons, but, I mean, he's been the dude with the Dodgers, and while he may no longer be what he was, I don't see why they would have got rid of him. Hell, if the Giants signed him, I'd be happy about it. But the Giants actually ended up signing Rodon. He was with the Chicago White Sox last year. He's not a bad pitcher. I think he's actually going to fit in well with what the San Francisco Giants need. Their pitching staff is already really solid. That's what led them last year. That was actually what was most surprising about them last year, is because they signed a bunch of like journeymen, like DeSclafani, and they just ended up having this dominant pitching staff. And so I think the addition of Rodon's going to be good because it gives us a little bit more depth. And while I don't think he's like an ace type of guy, he's going to be a dude who comes in and gets us a few wins. And the only problem with him is he is injury prone, but that happens. And then the Twins ended up trading for Sonny Gray. He's a pitcher in Cincinnati, and he had a great year last year. He's actually been pretty solid for the majority of his career, but last year he had a stellar year. And so going to the Twins is huge for him because the Twins already had one of the best pitching staffs last year. And so he just adds more depth to their team. And so we'll see what happens with the Twins. Another move this weekend made was the Yankees traded for Josh Donaldson from Toronto. They traded Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez to Toronto, and they got Josh Donaldson back in return. And that's not a bad move. Josh Donaldson's actually a very good player. It's just the majority of his career has been marred by injuries as well. And I'm actually kind of surprised that the Yankees ended up getting rid of Urshela. He was a very good shortstop. Sanchez, not really surprised by because he's off and on. He's very streaky with his hitting. And you could tell with some of the pitchers they had last year, he didn't really fit with them. So I'm not really shocked they got rid of him. But Josh Donaldson gives them a little bit of depth. He could end up being a DH, which would actually, I think, be his best role. Just because of his injury prone, how injury prone he's been over his career, but I don't know what they're really going to do with him. But I think that's a pretty good move overall. Still some free agents out there. Freddie Freeman has not been signed yet. Apparently, the word is that either the Braves are trying to sign him or the Dodgers are trying to sign him. I don't want him to go to the Dodgers, obviously. Can somebody stop the Dodgers from fucking buying every goddamn good player out on the market every single year? It's pissing me the fuck off. Please, Braves, please re-sign Freddie Freeman. Although I don't know if they're going to because they just traded for Matt Olson today from the A's. And while Olson is not anything of what Freddie Freeman's caliber is, they play the same position. So that kind of tells me that it's very possible that Freddie Freeman's going to be moving on somewhere. But who knows? He's still a free agent. Then Carlos Correa, also still a free agent, but it's looking like more and more he's going to re-sign with Houston. Chris Bryant, still out there. I'd really love to see him back with the Giants. I don't know how, if that's actually something possible. The Giants, they don't usually make those big splashes, especially anymore, but maybe hopefully they will. I mean, I really liked what he did towards the end of the season, and I think they really could use a big bat in their lineup. And their batting order is getting very old as well. So I think they could use somebody like Chris Bryant for damn sure, but he's still out there. Trevor Story, the shortstop, still out there, which is really crazy to me because he's one of the top shortstops in the league. And then you got Nick Castellanos, who's still out there as well, who had a great season last year and who could definitely probably benefit from the new universal DH rule that we have going on. Oh, and actually, something I forgot to mention when I was talking NBA is the playoff picture. You know, we're a couple weeks away, so let me go back to the NBA and talk about the playoff picture at this current point in time. So right now, the Phoenix Suns are the number 1 seed. Memphis Grizzlies are the number 2 seed, and this is in the Western Conference. Number 3 seed, Golden State Warriors. Number 4, Utah Jazz. Number 5, Dallas Mavericks. Number 6, Denver Nuggets. And then so in the play-in tournament, at number 7, you've got the Minnesota Timberwolves. At number 8, you got the Clippers. And then at number 9, you got the Lakers. And then at number 10, you got the Pelicans. You know, like I've continued to say, I mean, it's possible that the Lakers could win in the play-in tournament because, you know, the play-ins, it's not a series. It's just they play the Pelicans, and they just recently lost to the Pelicans, so my hopes aren't really high for that. I mean, if we do get Anthony Davis back, it does change a little bit, but who really knows? And then out in the Eastern Conference, number 1 seed, Miami Heat. Number 2 seed, Philadelphia 76ers. Number 3 seed, Milwaukee Bucks. Number 4 seed, Chicago Bulls. Number 5, Boston Celtics. Number 6, Cleveland Cavaliers. And then in the play-in tournament side, you've got number 7, Toronto Raptors. Number 8, Brooklyn Nets. Number 9, Atlanta Hawks. And number 10 is the Charlotte Hornets. So that's how the playoff picture is looking so far. The playoffs begin at the beginning of April, so We'll see what happens there, but I kind of feel like that's the way it's going to turn out. There's the possibility of maybe a couple seeds will change, but I kind of think that's the way it's going to look. The bottom of the barrel teams have basically been the bottom of the barrel teams, unless they're playing the Lakers, of course. Then they somehow magically get the win, and the Lakers get blown out somehow and are still magically in playoff contention somehow. But yeah, that's been our season. Now let's move on to March Madness, because it is that time of year, folks. Bracket time. And yeah, I'm excited for this. I love March Madness. The great thing about this year, though, is that there's a lot of parity. There isn't really one team you can look at and go, they're 100% the winning team. Like past years, there's been years before where you're like, oh yeah, that team's winning for sure. But then there's years like this year, and I think there's going to be a lot of parity. I think the eastern side of the bracket is probably the strongest of all four sides of the bracket. But I mean, there's going to be so many good matchups. And basically, what I'm going to do is, so today I'm going to go over the first round and all my picks in the first round. Then I'm going to go ahead and tell you who I've got for my Elite Eight, my Final Four, my championship, and then ultimately my champion. And then I will just obviously reevaluate each new episode until we get to the national championship. So let's go ahead and start off in the western portion of the bracket, starting off with Gonzaga, who's the number one seed. And Gonzaga will be playing Georgia State. I've got Gonzaga winning that one. Boise State versus Memphis is the next matchup. I've got Memphis moving on in that one. Then UConn versus New Mexico State. I've got UConn moving on in that one. Then Arkansas versus Vermont. I've got Arkansas moving on in that one. Then Alabama versus whoever wins in a play-in, team one. I got Alabama, whoever the team is. Then you got Texas Tech versus Montana State. I've got Texas Tech. Then Michigan State versus Davidson. I've got Michigan State moving on. And then Duke versus Cal State Fullerton. I've got Duke moving on. And the team I'm looking out for in this side of the bracket is definitely Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech is a team that a lot of people don't realize are that good. I know because they're in the Big 12 and that's where Texas resides. Oh, and Texas has lost to them before. So I know up close and personal how good Texas Tech is. So I think they could definitely make some noise on this side of the bracket. And I really wouldn't be shocked to see them represent in the Final Four, at least on this side of the bracket. Then moving on to the East side of the bracket, Baylor is the number one seed on this side. And it's their matchup is Baylor versus Norfolk State. I've got Baylor moving on. North Carolina versus Marquette. I actually have Marquette moving on. North Carolina is really not that good of a team this season. They were able to upset Duke, but I think that was more just kind of like a Duke, North Carolina thing. But overall, North Carolina has been a very quiet team, not very consistent, and so I think they're actually going to lose in the first round. Then St. Mary's versus the play-in team 4. I've got St. Mary's moving on. And I actually don't have any of the play-in teams winning any of the first rounds, no matter who they are, just because they're just not really good teams. I'm not saying they can't win. Obviously, any team can win. All you have to do is make the tournament. But I just don't really see any of the play-in teams really making any noise against whoever they're playing. Then the next matchup I have is UCLA versus Akron. I got UCLA winning that one. Texas versus West Virginia. I've got Texas, hook 'em horns, of course, but I'm pretty upset with how that's who they have to start the tournament off with, because Virginia Tech just won the ACC tournament. They're a good team. They just beat Duke, legit for sure. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do, and like I said, the East over here is probably the most stacked side of the bracket, and so it sucks that Texas has to start off that quick with that good of a team. And I wouldn't be shocked if they actually did end up losing that game. While I think they are overall a very good team, they still have had those moments this year where they've lost games. And I'm like, dude, what the hell just happened to you? So while I'm picking them to move on to the next round, I would not be surprised if they lost that one. Then Purdue versus Yale. I have Purdue. which, by the way, I think Purdue is definitely one of the best teams to watch in the tournament this year. Then moving on to Murray State versus San Francisco, I've got Murray State. And then Kentucky versus St. Peter's, I've got Kentucky moving on. Then moving over to the south side of the bracket. South side, yeah, south side. All my H-Town motherfuckers know exactly what I'm talking about right there. And speaking of H-Town, they're actually in this side of the bracket, so how fucking awesome is that I just did that? I didn't even mean to do that. And south side, Houston, if you don't know, then sucks for you. All right, so the number one seed on this side of the bracket is Arizona, and they are up against whoever wins the play-in team number 2. I got Arizona winning that one because Arizona has been one of the best teams this season, and I don't see them losing that early in the tournament. Then next up is Seton Hall versus TCU. I have Seton Hall moving on. Then Houston versus UAB. I have Houston moving on. Actually, I think Houston is a dark horse team in this tournament. They may fuck up some teams' days coming up here in the tournament. Then Illinois versus Chattanooga. Actually, this is one of my biggest upsets that I picked. I actually picked Chattanooga over Illinois. Illinois is a very good team, but there is always some weird upset. And so you just have to pick something, and for some reason I went with Chattanooga. It just looked like a good matchup to me for them because Illinois, they're good. They're a good overall team, but they also have their faults, and they have fallen apart at the seams, and just maybe Chattanooga could come in and be that Cinderella, at least for that game. Then the next matchup is Colorado State versus Michigan. I've got Michigan moving on. Then it's Tennessee versus Longwood. Longwood. I've got Tennessee moving on, and I actually think Tennessee is one of the best teams in the tournament this year. I think they could definitely make some noise. They've got Rick Barnes, used to coach the Longhorns, and he has this team playing well. He has brought this team back from the dead. The Tennessee used to be an awful basketball team for the last couple of years, and he has turned them completely around, and he's got them going. So I've got Tennessee winning that one against Longwood. Long. And then Ohio State versus Loyola Chicago. I have Loyola Chicago winning that one. They're that team that knows how to just come in and upset. And while Ohio State isn't that, I guess, to me, they're not that great of a team, at least. I still think Loyola Chicago, them winning would be an upset, and they're just that type of team who comes into the tournament and just gets those magical upsets along the way. Then the last matchup in the South bracket is Villanova versus Delaware, and I've got Villanova because I think Villanova is another one of those teams where I think they're just really fucking good, and I could see them going all the way to the championship. Then moving on to the Midwest bracket, the number one seed over here is Kansas, and they will be up against the play-in team number 3. I have Kansas moving on. San Diego State versus Creighton. I have Creighton moving on. Creighton's just one of those teams who just knows how to win, and especially in the first round, especially in the first couple of rounds, actually. They're just one of those weird teams that knows how to get the upset. And while it wouldn't be that much of an upset because they're an 8, they're 9, and San Diego State's at 8, but still, Creighton's just a team that always knows how to win come tournament time, so I've got them. Then Iowa versus Richmond. I've got Iowa winning, and that's another team you got to watch out for. They are something different, and not a lot of people are talking about them, but I really could see Iowa messing up some things in this bracket here. Then next up is Providence versus South Dakota State. I've got Providence moving on. Then LSU versus Iowa State. I've got Iowa State moving on. That's another upset. Iowa State's kind of like Iowa. They just are just a weird, scrappy team that you don't know exists, but they're still pretty damn good. Then Wisconsin versus Colgate. I've got Wisconsin. Then USC versus Miami, and I've got the U winning this one. They're just a very good team in my opinion. They've got great shooters. They've got solid defense, and I don't think a lot of people realize how good they are. So I've got Miami going on in this one, and then Auburn versus Jacksonville State. I've got Auburn moving on in that one. So my predictions for the Elite Eight. Over on the West side, I've got Gonzaga versus Texas Tech. Then in the East, I've got UCLA versus Purdue. And then in the South, I've got Arizona versus Tennessee. And then in the Midwest, I've got Kansas versus Auburn. So then moving on to my Final Four, I've got Gonzaga beating Texas Tech, so they would move on to my Final Four. Then in the East bracket, I've got UCLA beating out Purdue, so they would be in my Final Four. Then I've got Tennessee upsetting Arizona, so that puts Tennessee in my Final Four. And then I've got Auburn beating out Kansas, and that puts Auburn in my Final Four. With Texas Tech, with Gonzaga, I think Texas Tech is going to give them a good run for their money, but Gonzaga is just a really good team. They've got great shooters, and they've got great experience in the tournament. This is where they make their name. While they haven't won a national championship, they are a scary team in the tournament and have been for like the last 15 years. So I see them coming out of the Elite Eight and making it into the Final Four, and then UCLA against Purdue. Purdue, like I said, great team. But to me, UCLA, what I really like about them is they went to the Final Four last year, and basically they have the exact same team from last year. So I kind of feel like you can only get better, and you have to learn from the losses from last year, and I think they have. And, Jaquez is balling right now. He's had a spectacular last month. And UCLA, they're just playing great basketball. Like I said before, a couple weeks ago, that one of the reasons why you aren't really seeing them, I think, as one of the top-ranked teams is just because their season started off slow because of COVID, because a whole bunch of their guys tested positive, a whole bunch of games ended up getting canceled. So you didn't really see them a lot at first. But I just think they're a good tournament team, and I think they can only get better. And so I've got them moving on to the Final Four for a second year in a row. And then with just Arizona and Tennessee. Now, Arizona is a spectacular team. But like I said, Tennessee is something different to me. And I just see them messing things up in this bracket. And I see them just pulling off a huge upset over Arizona and moving on. And then with Kansas and Auburn, Kansas just has always been one of the historically great teams in college basketball. Auburn, not so much. They've always been a good college basketball team. But Bruce Pearl's really turned this team around. And there's just something about them. The last like 2-3 weeks of the season, they weren't as good as they started off. I mean, they were pretty much number one all season up until about 4 weeks ago. So they were dominating. Like I said, they have cooled off, but I just kind of see them just picking up and ended up in the Final Four. And so that would make my Final Four matchup Gonzaga versus UCLA. And in that one, Gonzaga actually, over the last few years, when they faced off against UCLA in the tournament, they beat them. So I kind of think UCLA needs to avenge those losses. And I do see them doing it. Like I said, they're playing great basketball, and they have a solid team with a good coach who they play good defense, and they play great offense. So I think they're going to be able to keep up with Gonzaga and points wise. And then I think their defense is going to be able to do enough to hold off Gonzaga, where UCLA will get the win and ultimately move on to the championship. And then in the other matchup for me, I've got Tennessee versus Auburn, which I think is a very interesting matchup because Bruce Pearl actually used to coach Tennessee. And when he left, Tennessee was trash for quite some time. And then they picked up Rick Barnes, and he's totally turned the organization around, just like Bruce Pearl's done with Auburn. And so I think this is going to be interesting from that standpoint. But also, these are just two really good teams. Now, where I think Auburn has the edge in that matchup would be on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're a little bit more stout in the paint, and I think they're a little bit more grimy, and they do know how to make the shots. So I have Auburn moving on to the championship. So my championship is going to be UCLA versus Auburn, and I have UCLA winning. Like I said, I think their experience plays a huge role in this, and I just think they're just a really good, solid team. And I've got them winning 69-65. And yeah, that's my national champion pick. And hopefully that does not get busted week one, because I mean, come bracket time, we all know it's cool, it's fun to pick all your brackets, but usually your bracket is busted like week one. There's always some weirdo thing that happens, and a bunch of us pick, like Gonzaga to go really far, and then they lose week one, and it's like, well, there went your whole bracket. And that's actually happened to me. I can't remember, I want to say like 3-4 years ago. I can't remember who I picked, but I picked somebody, and it was like a number one seed. It was a solid team. It might have been Gonzaga, actually. But I picked a team who were like number one, and they ended up losing in the first round. So, yeah, your bracket could be busted that quick. That's actually why, like, when I make my picks on my bracket, I don't really sit and think about it that hard. I look at the matchup and go, oh, Gonzaga versus Georgia State, and I just immediately pick Gonzaga. Sometimes you might think about something like what matchup here did I think about? Like Colorado State versus Michigan. I actually thought about that, and I was like, well, can I see Michigan winning that one? Yeah, I could see Michigan winning that one, so I'm going to go Michigan. So it's just like I don't usually look at stats when I'm doing this. I literally just look at the matchup and go, who do I think is going to win? Because really there is no rhyme or reason to this. You could do as many rabbit foots and chants and wear the same socks every game, and then read up on all the shit that you want, but that doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything at all. So I just look at the bracket and I just pick, and I actually was shocked that I ended up with UCLA versus Auburn. I was actually shocked that I ended up with UCLA as my champion. I've been kind of, because I am a UCLA fan. I'm Texas Longhorns number one all day, every day, but I do like UCLA as well. And so I've been watching them a lot this season. I've been noticing, I'm like, they are a really good team. They have the potential to make some noise. And I feel like them being in the bracket, the east side of the bracket where they're at, I think that really helps them to get to the championship, because they're going to beat a lot of good teams along the way. And so that's going to test them all the way up until the end, until they get to Auburn. And it's not that Auburn has an easy road. I mean, hell, they're going to face, on my bracket, they're going to face teams like Wisconsin and Kansas and ultimately Tennessee. So it's not like I think they have an easy road, but they definitely, I think, have an easier road than UCLA does over on the east side. But, we'll see how it goes. This is one of the greatest times of year if you're a sports fan, because Thursday, well, actually, the play-on games will start tomorrow or Wednesday. Yeah, I think it's actually Wednesday they start. But regardless of when they start, it's like we're going to have basketball all day, every day. And especially this weekend if you're a basketball fan or a sports fan, this is heavenly weekend for us, because you wake up, and on Thursday morning, see, I'm Central Time, so Thursday, games are going to start at 11 a.m., and I'm going to be watching basketball from 11 a.m. all the way until I go to bed at like 10 or 11 p.m., depending on what kind of games are going on at the end of the night. But it's just so spectacular to just wake up and watch basketball from start to finish. And it's not even you just get game after game after game. It's like when you're watching your first game, when that game goes into halftime, you could just switch the channel to another game that's going on right now. And then when that game gets to halftime, it's the second half of that last game you were just watching. So you're literally just watching game stacked upon game, stacked upon game, stacked upon motherfucking game. Oh, it is so awesome. And we do get that next weekend as well, but this weekend is the Jizz Our Pants Festival if you're a sports fan, because it's just game after 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 game, and it's just fucking great. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully Texas can make some noise. Hopefully UCLA is going to make some noise, and hopefully my bracket is not busted by Friday. And when we talk on Friday, we won't be completely towards the round of 32 just yet, but we'll definitely be recapping some of the games I was wrong about, see where my bracket's at. Hopefully it's not completely busted at that point. Hopefully yours isn't completely busted up until that point. But let's see where we're all at on Friday. And enjoy some March Madness, motherfuckers. And oh yeah, Tom Brady's back, bitches!